Hello and welcome to the Quarantines. My name is Rima Gupta and I'm delighted to have with me today Prachi Dio, who is the founder and executive director of Nai Disha. Prachi, welcome to this conversation.
Hey, thanks, Rima.
So Prachi has been a very good friend and she's doing this amazing work with her organization called Nai Disha. I have been part of some pieces of the journey. And Prachi, maybe for our audience, if you could tell us a little bit more about what Nai Disha does.
Sure. So, Nai Disha is a not-for-profit organization which works with families of children with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So, this includes conditions which people might commonly know, such as autism, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy. So, we are helping parents with all kinds of support they need in terms of information, knowing about what are the next steps, medical information regarding their child's condition, what they can do at home, help them find resources in their city. It could be a pediatrician or a school or a shadow teacher, whatever they need. And also we have parent communities, strong parent communities where parents interact with each other and find that support that they're looking for.
No, again, really appreciate what your organization is doing. I think being a parent, I know that I have leveraged services. And I think the beauty of your organization is, like you mentioned, connecting parents. I think one of the things is that being a parent, sometimes you feel you're alone in this journey, and just being able to connect with others, connect with resources, it gives us a great confidence, empowerment that, hey, we are not alone in this journey and there is help that we can reach out to. To follow up, coronavirus, as you know, is presenting a huge public health and economic crisis around the world. In these time of crisis, the most vulnerable and the marginalized segments of the society are the ones for whom the impact is strongest. Right? We have already heard about the migrant labor force issue across the country and how this lockdown has impacted them. I think given that you work in another segment, which is about parents and caregivers of people with disabilities, could you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing on the ground, what you're hearing from this community? What are the challenges they are facing?
Right. So I'll speak about people with disabilities at large first. So as you know, a lot of people with disabilities cannot really practice physical distancing as mandated because there are needs and they need that help and that support. So if I'm a person on wheelchair, I might need support moving from my wheelchair to the bed and so on. People with visual impairment do rely on touching various surfaces to understand where they're going and all of that. So for them also, physical distancing is a challenge. So that is one part of it where physical distancing is not possible, and many of them rely a lot on caregivers for the support. Again, with developmental disabilities, caregivers play a very important role, so they can't really practice the physical distancing as mandated. Second thing is information available is, while there is a mandate to have this information available in a mode where people with disabilities can easily decipher the information, be it with sign language, there still isn't enough information. NGOs are doing their bit to bring out information. In our in the developmental space, there are a lot of social stories being shared, a lot of about what is coronavirus, why you have a lockdown, how to following a calendar so that children understand why there is a lockdown and so on. Overall, there is an effort by parents to keep children busy. That is one thing, of course, that we are seeing. There were a couple of requests where the families are far away, the father is not in town. So we did our bit to figure out if the family could be together, and we were successful at that. And the father could get a pass to come back and be with the mother because she already has 3 kids and 1 child with a disability. So it was difficult for her to manage. So these have been the kind of instances we have seen, but more or less parents are focused and working with children, keeping them busy. I think that innate resilience which families of children with disabilities have is coming into picture here.
No, it's great to hear that, and I'm sure NGOs like yours are doing their part in making sure they're connected and giving them the right information, as you said, in the right format. And
Yes, schools are doing phenomenal jobs. A lot of special schools are doing phenomenal job continuing with the curriculum, sending worksheets to the parents, following up with them on phone, and supporting the parents so that they don't feel isolated. So I've seen it across that schools are doing a wonderful job.
Oh, that's good to hear. Yes. And I also feel that schools have really picked up this baton, right? And they've embraced technology and kind of leveraged technology to really reach out to everyone in their community and make sure that, they can offer that support. So, no, great to hear that. I think building on this conversation, one of the questions I have is regarding medical services, right? So, as we have heard from WHO and other medical professionals, that people with existing conditions seem to be more prone and more at risk. And although we have
Yeah.
heard a lot of susceptibility to older generation because they have existing conditions, very little has been spoken about people with disabilities. And I've not come across much data in this area. Have you heard about people with disabilities getting more infected? Is it because we are contained and a little bit more, secluded? Maybe that's helping us with reducing the infection in this segment of the population.
When the WHO guideline itself does talk about people with disabilities being more at risk because of their inherent compromised immune systems in many cases, and also having comorbid conditions, as you mentioned, like respiratory function and so on. So that plays an important role. I guess in India, we haven't heard much about people with developmental disabilities or disabilities at large being affected, and that data needs to come in. As you know, we have very little data at this point, but I have been following stories. Typically they're anecdotal stories, so I haven't seen data as such in terms of numbers, where there are cases where care homes are being affected. So that is something we as India should also be prepared about, because as you know, in the Western world and in other countries, there is a lot of independent living in with group living. So there are a lot of care homes where people with disabilities do stay, and those are affected. And there have been some heartbreaking stories about the care homes and what's happening. So perhaps this is the time for us to understand that, and we too have lot of residential centers. So if they can take steps, perhaps wherever there is family, the child or person with developmental disability can go back home. That would be the safest, because in a community living, you cannot really contain and have social distancing that way. At least at home, children will be safer. This is something we need to act on now. Second thing is because overall exposure in public places is being avoided by families. So if my elder brother has Down syndrome, as you know, so he is not stepping out. If we have to get something, it is one of us who's going to go out. So in that sense, they are protected. But again, we are just at the beginning of the crisis right now in India. So story is yet to unfold.
Sure. No, I think you made a very good point. Is I think those community homes or group homes where people with disabilities are living, they need to start gearing up for it, for chances of infection, because there are people coming in and out of the community.
And these things are not talked about as much. But again, uh, with domestic violence and any kind of violence, as it is, children with disabilities are more susceptible to violence and abuse, and in this situation of lockdown, it is going to be even harder.
Sure. No, I agree. And I hope, we can train people to become aware, to become sensitive, and to recognize these signs, right? And be able to offer help. Again, and following up on this is one of the key concerns among parents of special needs children is adapting to the new norms, as you rightly said, of social distancing and personal hygiene, right? It is difficult with different
Yeah.
disabilities and communities. And I know that specifically for children with autism, right, where it involves a behavioral change and sometimes they are hypersensitive, they do not understand why it is needed. It would be interesting to hear from you, because you work directly with parents and caregivers, how they are coping with teaching their children about these new rules. I know parents can be very, very creative. I've seen some of the work. So maybe you could talk a few about some of the stories that you've heard from your community.
Parents are using social stories and imitation strategies to teach their children about hygiene, be it hand washing, be it the way you sneeze, you cough, etc. challenge parents are probably facing right now is more related to usage of PPE, where children with disabilities do not like to have masks like that. But it is going to take practice. It is going to take. So if you can get your neurotypical child to do it in 2 days, we probably need a week to train our kids and get them used to it. But again, mainly because they are not being exposed to the external world, need of mask isn't as high at this moment. But again, we need to look into the future, and we might be living in a world for next 2-3 years where you always have to wear a mask, and this is where this practice, I guess it will take some time adopting, but with imitation and social stories it will be possible.
Sure. And I've seen some parents being really creative, right? So they take the favorite character of the child, or draw some things, make it an art
Yeah,
project for the child. So then they're part of engaging in making the mask, or it's more personalized to them. So
right, right.
yeah.
It's one more way of keeping kids engaged and then putting on the mask as well.
Prati, you work with a community of parents, experts, and volunteers. Your organization has done phenomenal work in keeping this community active and connected through several online workshops and networking sessions. Can you speak about how this has helped parents get the right information and, most importantly, not to feel alone in these times?
Yeah. So we have been doing a couple of webinars on various topics so that parents themselves can continue with therapies at home. That is one part. But again, one thing we have seen is children seem to be more calmer and happier at home, which also talks about we as parents understanding that a child is a child first, and so they are getting their time to relax and not do anything. So we are sharing activities. So we have this 30-day plan which is going on, where every day we share an activity that a parent can do, or some play activity, something creative that they can do with the child. And parents do come back with sharing information. So there was one of the parents shared her cookies that her daughter made. They both made it together. Parents are coming back with how they copied the video and did something similar on their own. And of course, parents are sharing their own creativities on what they can do. Simple things like while cooking, record it like a cookery show. So the child is engaged, more communicating, and at the same time, they're doing cooking together. Or night walks are helping calm children down. So all these strategies are being shared with parents, and the community has involved, and parents are involved, sharing this information with each other. Yeah.
Sure. No, I think that's wonderful. And I know that I'm part of one of these communities groups. So you have a lot of WhatsApp groups. Maybe you could talk a little bit, because for our audience who might want to engage, what are some of these channels
Yeah.
that you're engaging with?
Yeah. So we are conducting webinars. That is something we have been actively conducting on various topics that parents are requesting for. We are taking up requests from parents. So then the second thing we are doing is we are conducting online support groups, which is an excellent opportunity for parents from different cities to meet each other and share how they are engaging their kids and so on. Slowly, we want to move towards serious topics on how they're planning to remain safe and how they're planning on medical care that their children need and so on. Then the third thing is, of course, the WhatsApp group. So we have parent community. We have about 12 groups right now. These groups have evolved organically. So we have groups based on condition. We have groups based on cities, and we also have groups based on age groups. So on on these groups, parents remain connected, and our parent admins and parent champions do a phenomenal job sharing information as well.
Sure. No, I've been, as I said, I've been part of some of these communities, and it's great to see this live sharing by people. You suddenly feel you're not alone. Even though you are in your own home, you're still connected with a much larger community. And, to see the smiles of the children, to see them so proudly displaying something they've drawn or created or, made.
There are online competitions going on as well, which is phenomenal.
Wow.
So there are online, like one day is dancing competition, the other day is singing competition, and all these ideas are being shared.
Right.
Across.
Oh, and it's great to see the parents also so engaged, right? So it's nice to parents when they're posting these videos and this content on your website. I see that they're so proud. And I remember, we talked about milestones, and for our children, all these are even small inch stones matter. And to be able
Celebration of stones, yeah.
we are able to have a platform where we can showcase this and have other parents appreciate is great. And I think thanks to Naidisha for providing us this platform.
Okay.
So my last question, Prachi, is, again, this is something that I've gone through also as a parent of a child is, one major concern as a parent is that if I need emergency medical service, right, for my child, I'm stuck with a very, very hard decision of either going to the hospital and risking infection versus coping with it on my own. Maybe if you could highlight 2, 3 areas which the government should focus on and prepare proactively rather than in times of crisis addressing it.
Sarima, as you know, now there is provision the government has made, given permission that people with disabilities can get their caregiver at home, can be allowed for medical help that they need. But and there is also information now being shared in sign language and so on. But all of this has come as a afterthought. So if we can be prepared about this in the beginning. Of course, nobody anticipated having a pandemic of this sort, but that is what preparation is all about as well. So whether it is COVID-19 crisis right now or whether it was tsunami earlier. So if we can have a special task force which also looks at within the disability commission itself, if we can have something related to emergencies like this and what needs to be done, that could be of great help. We have seen a lot of helplines, but most of these helplines are being initiated by NGOs. So lot of NGOs have started helpline to support and provide provisions, send provisions to the homes of people with disabilities, etc. But these initiatives, if there is a national level helpline, and these initiatives can be started upfront during situations like this, because we know this is one of the most vulnerable sections of the society, that can go a long way.
Sure.
A second part is also about caregiver stress, because during the lockdown, while families are innately resilient, but it must be taking a toll on the families. Not only do you have to take care of everything happening around you, you are in a lockdown situation, not knowing what's happening, but at the same time, you're also constantly round the clock providing care to your person with disability at the same time. So if there is something that can be done specifically for caregivers, of course there are mental health helplines, but helpline of sorts for the caregivers can be of great help.
Sure. And maybe to add to that training you had mentioned earlier, right?
Yes, and the training as well, because even the medical staff, God forbid, when if there are cases where our children with autism or Down syndrome need that care for COVID-19, it is going to be a very difficult situation. It starts with decisions being made in terms of, it's just difficult to have this conversation as well and think about these situations. But situations where does the child go alone? Can the caregiver go with him? Children have various food preferences, food allergies. What do they do about it? And how will the nurse, how will the doctor understand, because they are also equally stressed at that time and working with so many patients, and then you have a person who's going to require special care. So if this training can be provided upfront, right from the security guard to the nurses to the staff which is going to work, to the ambulances and vehicles which will be taking people who are affected with the infection and so on, that could be of great help. We still have some time to talk about it. We can still talk about how are we going to handle such cases. There is still, we can still use that time and still sensitize staff, or if there can be designated staff too. Maybe we don't have enough time to train all the nurses, but at the same time you could have two psychologists or two people who are trained in working with people with disabilities, who are there to constantly guide them as well.
Well, I think that's a very important point. I've heard also about designated hospitals, right? So you could mark certain hospitals that where the staff is trained, as you rightly said, to work with
Yes,
children
yes,
or people with disabilities,
yes,
and
yes,
provide the right accessibility as well as the right care, and
yes,
make it easier than for parents. But I think very important point, and I think people.
yes. Designated hospitals would be a great idea, but we don't know the feasibility of it. But that can have the staff which is trained and they know how to care for people with
Yeah.
disabilities. And also provisions that need to be made that the caregiver will be there, or again, the medical aspects of it and infection needs to be thought through, but it requires some planning.
Right. Sure.
Parent child.
Is there any kind of help or like, from our audience, if there is, one thing that you would like to maybe ask them or, request them?
I think time like this tells us what inclusion is all about, and crisis like this has brought out the inequity that exists in our society. So, hopefully, this is a lesson for all of us as humanity to understand that we are all equally susceptible to crisis, and we are all in this together. So, that goes for disabilities as well. So, if you are a neighbor, a relative, a friend, and know that there is a family who has a person with a disability, you can always reach out for help, because many times parents and caregivers may feel inhibited to ask for help, but you could reach out. I'm getting a loaf of bread, would you want it? I'm getting vegetables, would you want it? Or just calling up to check upon how they are doing. That could bring in support, and if you have any information that you could share with families, again, that's great.
Good point. I think for all our listeners, I think part of building an inclusive society is being able to reach out to other people who need help. And I think a simple thing, as you said, is just asking, how can I help? Do you need anything? Goes a long
Yeah.
way to
Yeah.
us feeling human and to us feeling connected. So thank you.